There was this time when I actually stood on a highway with a poster that read, "Samosas are not unhealthy, you're lazy." And I mean it. Today we make about 70, 80,000 samosas a day. And with that itself, we are the largest manufacturers.
Like, where do you see all of this going? What is the most optimistic scenario?
We're very optimistic, right? Especially given that, the way things are changing in our country right now, and all over the world. I think the number one thing that keeps us very, very excited about building this Indian brand is that there is a renewed pride in our identities as people.
If you could go back and give your starting self one piece of advice, what would it be? Welcome everyone to the next episode of Week in Entrepreneurs. Today we have Diksha Pande with us, who is the founder of Samosa Party, a new age brand and QSR restaurant chain that I frequently visit. Today we're going to be talking to her about what it took to actually build Samosa Party and scale its operations, and also get her advice for other budding entrepreneurs who potentially want to start something in the restaurant space.
Hi Rohith, hey Govind. It's a pleasure to talk to, of course, customers as you have been. And I'm really excited about the Weekend Entrepreneur. First of all, I really love the name. I think there is an entrepreneur in a lot of us, right? And not everybody is able to immediately make the shift from a corporate job to a startup. But I think formats like this and the ability for us to come out and share our lives with budding entrepreneurs, or even people who are very early in their journey, I think this is going to be super helpful for a lot of people.
Yep. That's our hope. No, absolutely. I'm so excited to have you here. With that said, let's actually jump in, right? Could you talk us through the origin story for Samosa Party, and the problem you were looking to solve with it?
So, Samosa Party was started by Amit, who's my co-founder and husband. And initially, he comes from Indore, and he's a techie by profession. So he moved to multiple different cities. And because of his origin from Indore, there's, you get the best quality food in that city. And wherever he went, whether it was working in Bombay, Gurgaon, Bangalore and Delhi and so on and so forth, he realized there is no good quality street food available anywhere. And let alone the hygiene or the other environmental aspects, even the quality of food or the standardization, that didn't exist. And that irked him a lot. And, he said, I wanted to do something about it. So we knew each other for years, and we used to keep talking about this problem. At that time, I was actually working at Pizza Hut, and I was heading innovation for Pizza Hut for the Indian subcon. And as part of a lot of the research that went into, what would it take for us to build Pizza Hut for the future, say in the 2020s and going forward, what should Pizza Hut look like? There's a lot of research that I was doing with consumers, and I realized that, people wanted familiar tastes. People loved our Indian street food, and the ethnic snacking was a really, really large category. Unfortunately, there was no hygiene, there was no standardization, and there was no consistency. At the same time, it wasn't also cool, right? I mean, with the advent of social media, you wanted to do more cooler things which you can show off on your social media. So we got talking about this, and I wasn't the one who took the first plunge. He took the first plunge. And somewhere in 2018, he started a small outlet in Indranagar in Jeevan Bhimanagar. The food was outsourced. It was really a makeshift sort of arrangement. But the one thing that we were sort of committed to, and why I said I find this interesting is because I was a weekend entrepreneur. I had my weekday job, and then on the weekends I used to help him out with whatever he was doing. So we figured that we wanted to give freshly fried samosas every time customers ordered, because that's one gap that existed, right? People could get samosas only between 4 to 7, because that's when your typical street side halwa is making them, right? And it was more a convenience factor. So we said, why can't you have this product just like a KFC or a Domino's or a Pizza Hut? Why can't you have this 24/7? Why can't you have freshly made samosas throughout the day? Why can't you have them in different flavors and formats? Why should there be only aloo? Why are people serving these? There's a lot of cafe chains that were serving you samosas, but that came out of a microwave and it was soggy. So it wasn't crisp. it was being served with a sachet of tomato ketchup. So all of these things, it really hurt the foodies inside us. And we said, there's probably potential here and let's do something about it. So we started with this really tiny outlet and it did really, really well. And we used to spend our evenings there. We used to spend the weekends and the customers would tell us how they craved and how they looked forward to come here at the end of a long day to catch this break and, try out all the different fillings and flavors that we were providing. So that's how Samosa Party started. Interestingly, when it started to scale, when we had our first 4 or 5 outlets and we started doing deliveries online, we were still both in our full-time jobs. And that's and somewhere we realized that the customers are asking for is the metrics are looking very good. We weren't making any money, and that wasn't the metric that we were after, right? We were looking more closely at customer satisfaction, the NPS, the repeat rates, and so on. And we figured all of this was looking very, very healthy. So why not do this full time? So somewhere at the end of December 19 is when both of us quit our jobs, and we said we're going to do this full time. 2 months later, there was COVID and there was an entire shutdown. So we had to close down the stores. And next problem that we had to solve is how do we get this food to our customers in a hygienic, reliable manner? We had about 40 employees. So how do you make sure that, these people, how do you put bread on their table, right? How do you make sure that they're employed, their families are taken care of? So one thing led to another, and I think that's when the business became serious because you realize that what a huge responsibility we had taken on. And we had to go on from one thing to the other. And here we are today. We are 65 outlets across 5 cities and probably the largest samosa brand in the world. Because we are just in India, there is nothing like this that exists anywhere else in the world. So I can brag and say we are the largest in the world. But we want to continue that leadership and, take this phenomena and this movement of global level Indian QSR all over the world someday.
Diksha, if I can double click on one bit, right? I'm quite interested in people's journey from observer to weekend entrepreneur to a full-time entrepreneur.
Right.
So when you said that your husband had started this initially in Indranagar, what went into that? Was it a big inflection point, especially because you're setting something up physical? Did you have to go in, sign a lease, hire a bunch of folks, put in your own capital? And then I'm also curious what was that sort of burden of evidence which convinced both of you to quit your jobs? Because in your case, you're also husband and wife, and then both your income streams are now entirely consolidated into this one project.
Right. So there's an interesting story to this, Govind. We were co-founders first, and we only just got married a year and a half ago.
Oh, okay. It's the other way around.
Married after our Series A, right?
Oh, wow.
And, so initially it was just, helping out a friend, and also because, I came from the industry. He's from the tech background. He was actually a computer science engineer, worked with Intel, EY and the likes. And he was very passionate that he wanted to always build a business, and specifically around food. And of course, our conversations around that right in the beginning. So yes, I was the observer and then of course the helper over the weekend. In fact, I don't think I would have probably even at that time given very sane advice, right? Because when you're coming from a corporate setup, the way you think is. And when we spoke to them, and both of us were managing, one part of the cashiering or the handing off, we had just 2 employees apart from the 2 of us. And this was, I think this was a holiday or something in my office, and we were doing this, and we got so much validation from consumers who said they'd been ordering online store like this because the experience of eating a really hot samosa out of a fryer is again different compared to how you get it home, right? So there was so much customer love that I think our customers made us do it.
Yeah, I guess the only other question I had on this was why samosas, right? I understand. I mean, I can detect a sense of like you were looking at things from a fast food perspective, and then samosas is a natural conclusion. Were there other options, and why you also embedded the name of the SKU of the item itself in the brand name? So just curious about that.
Right. So samosas are the most loved and the most universal Indian snack, right? And if you talk about out-of-home snacking, there are 60 million samosas consumed in India every single day. Of course, we didn't know this when we started. This is, at a later stage when you're putting an investor deck together and they say, what is the TAM? That's when you get to the research and everything, right? Initially, it was more about, and maybe it's a bias that, when we looked around, we only found a lot more samosas because we were probably just looking at it. But I think it's the most universally accepted street food from India. It's accepted across the country, from north to south. It's a misconception that people eat a lot more samosas in the north, but I think Kerala, Andhra Pradesh consume a lot of samosas, right? The variant may be slightly different. Like in Andhra, you get the patti samosas. But they're consumed by kilos. And we learned all of this. We looked at, the popularity of the product. It's also internationally popular. So India exports samosas to 140 countries right now.
Really?
Yeah, it's the most popular Indian snack. It's on whether it's a Michelin star menu or even if you go to a neighborhood grocer in somewhere in North America or Canada, chances are that, you will find samosa in some form or the other. So we figured that the market opportunity was really large. The product is great. It also lends itself a lot more to innovation than a couple of its counterparts, without having to really tamper with it, right? I mean, if you look at the construct of the samosa itself, it's a very familiar construct, whether it's an empanada or a dumpling or dim sums and so on, or gyozas in Japan. The construct is very similar. I think the only difference is that, the dough is slightly more leavened and you're frying it. But otherwise, dough stuffed with proteins, vegetables, meats has always been a construct which is popular all over the world. So that's how we and again, the supply problem existed. We figured that there's so much demand. If we asked people what's your favorite Indian snack, everybody said unanimously it's samosas, right? But we don't get good samosas. The next follow-up question we would ask people during our research is, when did you last eat a samosa? And they'd say, there's no good quality samosas available here. I used to eat them in my childhood, or I would eat them in my college, or there is a such and such place. Whenever I go to that part of town, I can have a samosa, but I absolutely love them. There is no access. So we figured there's so much demand, but there is a lack of quality supply. And that's what we set out to solve for.
Right. This, I don't know if you have this undercurrent of people tapping into the nostalgia around the samosa as well, but my wife, I just thought I'd throw this in. My wife has this thing where she's like, whenever it rains, the thing my memory goes to is, at least in her mind, the evocative image is potatoes should peel themselves, wrap themselves up in like basin and then jump into the oil. And that's the image that my mom used to evoke. So I wish I could have the same thing. And then that's how our personal association with the brand started. But I guess everyone has their own story with it. So
yeah, absolutely. It's very universal. It's rooted in nostalgia. And it's so simple, right? It's the ultimate unifier. You can have it in boardrooms as well as, you can, we actually have this saying that samosas they are relevant from the chairman to the doorman. And they are relevant from, Samastipur to Sydney, right? Anyway, I think I haven't found people who say I hate samosas. Or maybe they avoid me, I don't know.
Love it.
They're not your customers.
Love it. Diksha, so super interesting. One of the things though, I want to dive into, again, from my memory of Samosa Party, and this is probably even 6 years ago or something when I first tried it. You guys had very interesting, let's say, flavors, right? And very interesting things you did with the samosas. For example, I remember having the corn and cheese samosa, the barbecue chicken samosa. And then the other really cool thing about it was in terms of actually, you used to actually end up branding the samosa, right? Like BC, it would be branded on the samosa itself. So it was just very unique at that time, right? And even from 6 years, those kinds of product innovations start. What was it there from the beginning in that very first outlet? How do you end up deciding the menu for that? I'm just curious.
So first up, I think we really proud of our teams for being very, very innovative with anything and everything we've done. And that's a DNA that we inculcate in the company, from day one. Whenever a new person joins, we give them a free hand at innovation in whichever area of the organization. So the number one innovation, which doesn't seem that obvious, is actually the freshly fried samosas, right? Because even till date, You can't get freshly fried samosas round the clock. Mostly people fry them in batches, and they give you a soggy samosa that comes out of a microwave, or at best, somebody would pop it into an oven and just heat it. It's not the same hot, crispy, crunchy that you get out of Samosa Party, right? So there's a lot of work that initially went into building that system, which is the overall supply chain, the process, the kind of ingredients we use, and all of these are closely guarded secrets of how are you able to make a freshly fried samosa in under 4 minutes every time a customer orders, right? Because we didn't want to go this batch frying and 30 minutes fresh kind of a route. It had to be like a KFC or a McDonald's where you order and you get your food in your hands, and at the same time it's freshly made for you. So that was the first and foremost innovation. From there, it led to innovation around fillings and formats. And, we figured that people were accepting of newer flavors, and they were accepting of newer formats. I mean, if you deconstruct all of the American fast food that's sold in India as well, right? It is beginning, or I would say, so much of it looks like Indian food now. There is makhni sauce, there is paneer tikka, there is chicken tikka on it. Even the aloo tikki burger, in a way, if you look at it and deconstruct, it's actually a samosa, right? The filling of the aloo tikki is potatoes and green peas, which is exactly what goes into a samosa filling. The bun outside is just, the samosa casing has been replaced with a bun. But you see what's going on here, right? Like, Indians are very particular about their flavor profiles. And therefore, even the large giants, when they came into India, they adapted the flavor profiles completely to suit our taste buds, right? And with that, we said, if all of this Western food can be Indianized to this extent, why not give our customers a reverse of this and maybe try out a few foreign formats as well? So the corn and cheese, or the pizza samosa, which is, by the way, our number one bestseller, the peri peri samosas, all of these came out of that thesis, and some of these products did exceedingly well. So we started this concept of, bucket of the month, where every month we would bring you a new innovation, keep it only on for about a month, and then replace that with a new bucket every month. Then we realized that, as we started growing, then every month it wasn't possible to innovate as much. So we've now moved to quarterly windows. So we do all our innovation launches now every quarter. Yet the genesis of, bringing something new to the customers every single time they come onto your platform is something that's very, very strong in the company. Stamping the name was, again, it was a consumer problem we were trying to solve, because if you had so many varieties, and nobody had faced this before because they only did aloo samosas. So if you got 20 samosas, all of them are similar. You could just pick one, right? But if you ordered from Samosa Party, there could be a paneer samosa, a corn samosa, an aloo samosa, or something else in your box. And how would you know which is which? So without really tag, and you can't tag them individually, because then you're putting gum and paper and everything on every individual piece. So we said, why not find a way of branding the samosa itself? And actually, it didn't start as branding. Why not put the label on the samosa itself? And when we started doing that, we figured, oh, this is different and this is unique to us. How do we make this even better? Then we looked at, what else was happening in the cookie industry. So if you look at, let's say, a hide and seek or a Parle-G or a Good Day, none of these need their wrappers. Their identity is on the cookie itself, right? You sit and this is a Good Day, this is a Parle-G, this is a hide and seek, and so on and so forth. I think every single one of them has a unique shape, a unique identity. So we said, how do we make our product carry our brand without having to invest in heavy branding or packaging and so on over and above that? So that brand on the samosa itself, where we wrote aloo or pizza or paneer or corn, that became our identity. And, we've been viral on Twitter and Instagram and so many other places many, many times because of that. So it was the most free piece of marketing that we could get. Including even TV crews who showed up to see, okay, we want to see, what does this samosa look like? What is this branded samosa, and so on. So yeah, it started with a consumer problem, but it turned into a huge branding advantage for us over time.
Yeah. No, this is actually quite amazing in terms of like investing in the, people keep saying, right? Like in the early stages, it's all about product. You just have to invest so heavily into the product. And it's so clear that you guys innovated so much on that the product itself became like free marketing for you guys almost, which is amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I think we did the freshly frying piece, right? It was almost impossible to crack. In fact, my whole circle is so many different chefs, and some of them very, very decorated chefs who've served royalty and who've been national award winners and whatnot. When I spoke to all of them about doing a freshly fried samosa, they just threw their hands up in the air and said, "This can't be done." But we persisted, and interestingly, there was this spectrum of chefs and food technologists who are dealing with a lot of knowledge, scientific knowledge with food. And then on the other hand, you had the karigars, because people who make samosas, they're not just called, they're just not called halwais or anything, right? They're all called karigars, or they're called master ji, right? Because they have that
Right.
skill and there's respect for that skill. So we had to bridge the gap between these two, and then apply our own learnings, and then apply, your own research methodologies to bridging that gap and coming out with the perfect product. So it took us almost 2 years
Got
to
it.
crack that piece.
Got it. No, really interesting. Let me actually ask something else. From what I understood, you guys were doing this part time for a long time. Both you and Amit had your own full time jobs and were doing this as like a side hustle, if I were to use that term.
Yeah.
How how did you guys actually make it work? What were the logistics that went into it to actually have this, I would argue, fairly involved side hustle where you actually have an outlet, people,
Right.
a lot of other things to sort of deal with. It had to be open every day. I'm curious to know a little bit more about the journey at that time, because a lot of folks probably, they may not want to end up giving up all the safety that comes in with the regular paycheck just yet, but they would want to potentially start a side hustle, which could maybe evolve into something else. So I'm curious to know about what that stage was like.
So it was actually very taxing, to be honest, Rohit. I mean, we used to start at 5 in the morning, where we would show up at our kitchen and get the production going and so on and so forth, and also make sure that the dispatch for the day is done, because your supply chain, right? And a lot of people think that F&B is, and especially scale F&B, it's a food business. What we've learned over the last few years is that more than the food and everything, and of course, food and quality is important, but as you grow, supply chain becomes a very, very important part of this business, right? So we had to ensure that we were there at our kitchen every single day, ensuring that supplies were available and they were sent to the right outlets at the right time. And that's something that we committed ourselves to right from the beginning. So there was a full charter that was written down, that what are the things that we will never compromise on, right? Starting from the ingredient quality to what kind of products will we make, which would include preservative-free, emulsifier-free, and so on and so forth. So there was a charter around products. Then there was a charter around supply chain, that we believed in we will never run out of products, right? And even till date, our uptime in terms of our product availability is almost close to 95-98%, which at this kind of scale is sort of hard to achieve. But that's something that we've really committed to, that every time a customer comes, and because we've realized that everybody has their own favorite. If you're a barbecue chicken samosa lover and you come to the platform, you don't find that, chances are you will go away. You will not settle for something else. So that's something that we want to make sure that, we want to ensure availability at all points in time. So we used to start really early in the morning, get the production started, get the supply chain sorted, and then by 8:30, 9 o'clock, head to our regular jobs, come back by 5:36 into the outlet, which is where, your maximum hustle with consumers happened in the evening. Spend up to about 10 o'clock in the evening at the store, talking to customers, fixing all the day's issues, and so on and so forth. Cash collection also was an important part, because, this is 2018-19, and people are still paying cash. So doing all of that, and then sorting out stuff for the next day, which would include ingredient availability, rostering, and all the other housekeeping aspects, right? A lot of it was delegated right from the beginning. So I think that's one big lesson in entrepreneurship, especially side hustles. I think you really have to trust and depend on your people. So ensure that you delegate, and you delegate right. Ensure that trust, which is a two-way street, ensure that is displayed in all your interactions. and also accept the fact that everything will not be the way you would have done yourself. If I was doing something, it would definitely be better than what some of my colleagues or teammates are able to do. But I have to accept the fact that my time is being utilized somewhere else. So just being hard on or being hard on yourself for not being able to do it to 100% won't help in that stage. Because if you're that passionate and if you really think that you'd rather be doing it yourself, then do it full time. Then don't do it as a side hustle. Right? To be honest, we never looked at it as a business. This was just being done for passion and just, because for so many years we've been talking and Amit was so committed to do it. I said, why don't you go ahead and just start? Right. And once he started and I started spending time, then I also started to enjoy it. And much later, like I said, somewhere at the end of 2019 is when that validation came that, why not give this a serious shot?
Sorry, can I ask a question here from Amit's perspective, right? So sounds like you were from the industry or adjacent. I think you said he was a consultant at EY. A lot of the stuff that you described is quite operational. And I imagine maybe I'm asking on behalf of like a software person like me for whom this world is very different. I guess my question is, how much of this can be figured out on the go and how much of it was doable because how much of it can just be done through sheer like desire to solve the problem versus having someone who has experience in the industry who can sort of guide you through not making the standard mistakes.
So Govind, I firmly believe as an entrepreneur today that, everything can be figured out on the basis of desire and passion. What you have to do is you have to understand the most critical factors of the industry and specifically something like food. Right. On our first day at the Oberoi, we were taught that, one man's food is another man's poison. And that's so true because, people have allergies or you could not have dealt with the food properly, which could cause food poisoning or serious illnesses and so on and so forth. Right. So that is one thing that I think that's something which I guarded personally, but other than that, I think all the operational aspect and all, it's all common sense, right? It's a people's business. You're dealing with customers on one hand, you're dealing with teams on the other hand. It's all people's business. It's all common sense. I don't think there is anything which is super critical that you have to get to books to read. But I think today there is so much knowledge which is democratized that, you can get access to that. You can reach out to people and learn. You can actually just go to YouTube and learn so many things. So I think a lot of it is desire and passion. What you do need to understand for industries where safety of the end consumer or that's important. You have to build some knowledge around that and not take that lightly. Neither you nor your teams, right? If a product has, and a lot of educated people from the industry make these mistakes or they make these deliberate mistakes also in the name of cost management, right? Where they could be serving you an expired product saying that, oh, looks fine to me. Right? Even though it's past its expiry date. So as long as you understand those principles and you say that, I'm never going to compromise on that, I think it all depends on where your heart is. If you want to give the best to your consumer, you're not going to do any of this. And you also have to understand the risks in businesses like these, where you could end up in a lot of trouble if you're not taking care of food safety and hygiene.
Thanks a lot, Diksha, for sharing that. Super duper interesting. So that was Samosa Party then, right? Fast forward 6+ years to Samosa Party today, where you've opened up 55 new outlets in 5+ cities. What does it take now to run a Samosa Party outlet? Could you just break that down for us, right? From opening to what day-to-day operations look like?
Right. So Rohith, it's 65, not 55.
65. Oh, okay. Amazing.
We are hopefully going to cross 100 by March. So yeah, that's the journey we are on. Talking about running an outlet, I think it still remains pretty much the same. Right. It always has been and it always will continue to be. It's a business that belongs to the person who stands in that store. Right. And that ownership, that excitement, no matter what's happening in the corporate office, no matter what's happening behind the scenes, if there is no excitement within the team that runs the store, if there is no ownership that the team at the store feels, then the business is not going to scale, or even that store's not. It's a block by block business, right? Every store has to feel and behave the same way. It has to provide a great customer experience. It has to provide great products and so on. We can enable all of that. But eventually what goes on over there between the customers and the teams, it completely is the prerogative of the outlet manager and the teams down there, right? So it's not very different. I would say whether you're running a single outlet or you're running a few thousand. I think the down the line, your team members need to be motivated. They need to understand their products well. They need to be trained really well, and they should find purpose in delighting their customers. If that doesn't happen, then you can't grow in this business, unfortunately.
Got it. So that's actually very interesting, and that leads me to my next question. Whenever I visit a Samosa Party outlet, people are very pleasant. They're always smiling. I feel very much at ease at Samosa Party and very welcome almost. And that's one of the things that you brought up in this conversation as well, where you do a lot to actually develop the sense of ownership at every single person working at each outlet. Could you talk a little bit more about that? What do you actually do to build that culture in essentially a distributed team, right? I'm curious to know what are the frameworks that you apply to actually make that happen.
Right. So the number one is, hire right. You will, and this industry is really, really starved for good people right now, because it's a good thing, because the industry is growing. The QSR penetration in India is growing. The restaurant penetration in India is growing. There's a few that come like a flash in the pan and then they go away. But then there is a lot of great F&B businesses being built in India right now, right? Whether it is only on the cloud kitchen side or on the physical retail side, our industry, I think there's never been a better time to build QSR brands than it is today. So it's a great sign for the industry. But at the same time, there isn't a formal education system or a formal schooling system that exists for QSRs or businesses like us, right? There are the hotel management colleges that sort of groom you to be hoteliers, but for the QSR industry, there isn't any. So you pick people from a combination of, let's say, hotels, restaurants, sometimes even retail and so on, but you hire for the right attitude. And that's a place where maximum amount of mine and Amit's time goes. In fact, on an average, we are interviewing 4 or 5 people every day. So anybody and everybody above a shift manager is interviewed by either one of us. And in many cases, both of us, right? And what we look for is not necessarily the educational background or which companies they work for. It's actually what you just pointed out. If I feel excited talking to a person on a Zoom call or in person, right? If he's able to put a smile on my face, if there is energy, excitement, and curiosity, then that's our person, right? I say the word curiosity also here because I think a curious store manager should know his customers, and this is a quality that we try and inculcate. Every time we walk into a store, we ask them, who is that customer? Why is he here? I've seen them before. What are they eating? Why are they not eating something else, right? Just sort of sharpen their minds to ask more questions and therefore engage more with people. During COVID times when we were a cloud-only business and we had no interface with our customers, and we realized that, there were things that we were falling short on, right? There were times when we would run out of chutney because there was no availability, and, some farmers could not come with the required ingredients to Bangalore that day. So we had a lot of those problems which used to try and overcome in many different creative ways, I would say. But one thing we figured we were really missing was that people to people connect. So at that point in time, we came up with these cards, which had the picture of this outlet in charge and, his story. It would talk about, I am so-and-so, and, I've been living here for this much time, and this is my favorite product. And it was all stories written by them, by the way. We asked them that, why don't you record a little bit that you would, if there was a customer standing in front of you, what would you say to him? And they recorded short videos and sent it to us. And we were all working from home back then. And we translated that back into, a nicely worded text, which would go with their picture with every single order. Right. And the genesis of this was that, you go to your neighborhood samosa chai place. And for years, these places have existed on trust on that human to human connection where you know your chai guy, you know your samosa guy, right? They even give you credit for months and months, and they don't even have your phone number. They don't know where you live. But that's the whole nature of this interaction between your regular chai samosa wala and you. So we wanted to replicate that in a digital environment, and I think that worked beautifully. We had one team member who had mentioned that it was his dream to take a flight back to his hometown if situation permitted, and if you could have enough money for that. You won't believe, we actually got an email on our help desk stating that whenever he wants to go home, I want to sponsor his flight. And it was so heartwarming to see that, something that we wanted to create in terms of how do you build that human to human connection, it went beyond that, right? And those are some of the little things that we've been doing in the company. Number one, like I said, putting our people and our teams front and center. Right? They know better about your customers and your operation than you do today. There was a time where probably Amit and I knew better, but today we lean on them to understand what's going on. How can we solve a problem, right? So they are your number one leaders, and they are your interface with your consumers. Number two, I think always build forums and build channels for people to communicate upwards. As organizations grow, it's possible for us to talk, top down, but it's very, very important in distributed businesses to have a bottoms up communication, which could be as crude and as annoying as WhatsApp groups. I think we are part of like some 200 plus groups, but so be it. If that's what it takes to be close to the ground realities, then so be it. The third thing that we very, very consciously do is walk in our customers' shoes. So, of course, we're big foodies, but wherever and whenever there is an opportunity, we just show up at a new restaurant opening. We just show up and we order a lot. We're constantly on Swiggy and Zomato, just looking at, how is the behavior of consumers changing here? How are we behaving differently than what we used to 5 years ago, right? So I think these 2 or 3 things, staying very close to your teams and staying very close to your consumers in the market, is very, very crucial, not just for growing businesses, but really large businesses, because, you can have a downfall if you're not listening to what your consumers and teams are saying.
Yeah, just on the consumer trend, and I know we wanted to jump to a few things, but just on the consumer trend, what have you seen changing? Like one, as you're saying that, one of the things that I can think of as a counter sort of cycle in my in my sort of friends group is everyone's trying to get super healthy, right? Everyone's trying to become the best version of themselves, and there is this movement against more fried food. I know my wife actively buys anything that says baked, so I'm just curious, like, are there any trends you're seeing particularly recently, and what demographics they're taking place in, even more broadly for anyone who's listening to this, trying to build food in general?
Sure. So you're absolutely right, Govind. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of information and communication channels that have now opened up, right? Unfortunately, not all of them may be true. So how we perceive health, right? Health has 2 definite, very clear parts to it: health and hygiene. We focused on hygiene in the first bit, and I think that also lends itself to health. Not all fried food is bad, and not all baked food is good. In fact, a croissant probably has a lot more calories than a samosa. We would happily eat a croissant because, it comes across as this innocent baked food product. It doesn't have potatoes inside or anything, right? But scientifically, it is a lot more calorie dense than a samosa because the layers and layers of butter that have gone inside. Similarly, for a samosa, what's important, and that's something that we follow very, very diligently, is the oil management program, right? Not all oil is bad. Oil which is clean, it is not being recycled again and again, and it does not have a total particulate matter or a TPM higher than 25 is not bad for you, right? So those are some of the things that we're very particular about. Our entire product lineup is, zero preservatives, zero emulsifiers, no MSG. So these are some of the things that we're very particular about. And we follow that to the T in every single product innovation that comes out of our kitchens. And like I said, the biggest villain or the perceived villain, so to speak, is the fat. We try and keep our fat clean. In fact, we dispose the used oil, and that disposal also we do it in an environmentally sustainable way, right? So it goes to qualified recyclers who will only use it for detergent production or biofuel production and so on and so forth. It doesn't go back into the food economy. Otherwise, a lot of times used oil goes back to the street carts and vendors who actually buy it at a much cheaper price and then use that for food. So like I said, there is information and then there is a little bit of misinformation. Our job is to, just stay committed to what we're doing and focus on both health and hygiene. Having said that, we did innovate on a few products which were, say, multi-grain, millet samosa, and so on and so forth. We even launched them for a brief period of time, but it didn't gain critical mass then. I think once we are slightly larger, we will be going back into those innovations. They're all sitting ready in our pantry. But when the time's ripe and we feel that, there is a critical mass for this, I think we will bring them back onto the table. My personal mantra on this, because, I think I'm also in the same age group, the same demographic circle where there is so much chatter around health and getting fitter and so on and so forth. I think food has always been the easiest target in this triarchy of, like getting fit. Nobody wants to hit the gym. Nobody wants to lead a more active lifestyle. We don't want to give up on our digital addictions. We don't want to complete our entire 8-hour sleep cycle. So what's the easiest culprit to blame here? Let's blame the food we're eating, right? Good health is a combination of all of these things. Even drinking enough water is so vital. So we eat our samosas not just as consumers but also for tastings and trials that happen every now and then. But at the same time, we try and balance it with movement, with dedicated workout time. I walk minimum 12,000 steps a day, drinking those 3 liters of water, ensuring you have 8 hours of sleep and a stress-free mind. I think it has to be a combination of all these things. Unfortunately, a lot of people on Instagram and elsewhere, they just go after the food because that's a good clickbait for you to say, don't eat this, don't eat that, right? And it's been done historically. Today, social media is the medium, but otherwise, early in the day, people went after fat when I think sugar is the main culprit, right? Refined carbs are the main culprit. So if your fat is managed well, you do need a certain amount of fat in your body and in your daily diet. And we are not saying eat samosas daily. I think we're saying indulge, but indulge responsibly once in a while. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the childhood moments, those monsoon rains. Enjoy time with your family and friends, and do it responsibly.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, I've learned a lot there. I'm going to Google after this, but thank you.
There was this time when I actually stood on a highway with a poster that read, "Samosas are not unhealthy, you're lazy." And I mean it. I mean it. Because it's the sign of our times. I mean, we just look for the easiest culprit and target and just go after that, right? We have to course correct in every single facet of our life if we want to be healthy. It can't be just food.
Right. No, got it. Fair enough.
Cool, Diksha. So let's actually shift gears and let's talk about numbers now. What are the key metrics that you look at on a day-to-day basis or an outlet-to-outlet basis? Because you do have 65 different outlets now and you can't end up visiting every single outlet every single day. So curious to know what these numbers are that you and Amit, your co-founder, husband, look at every day.
So the number one, I think I've said this before, but we're a very, very customer-centric company. So we look at our ratings every single day. In fact, we have a tool today which gives you an indication or, which flags any poor rating or poor customer experience on a real-time basis. And all those mails are also tagged to us, right? So every now and then we open those and look at, what's happening over here. We start our day with a customer centricity call. So the marketing team takes us through yesterday's complaints or issues and, what are the key highlights from that and what needs immediate fixing, what could have been a human error, and so on and so forth. We are extremely proud of the fact that because of this, the culture has flown down the team, and we are amongst the highest rated QSRs in the country, right? So if you open up Swiggy or Zomato, you'll see that, our stores are amongst the higher rated stores. In fact, there is an outlet which is also 4.6, 4.7 rated. And I personally find it impossible that how has the team achieved this, because historically I've only seen, ice cream or dessert brands having ratings like that. But for us to have one or two crown jewels like that in our portfolio is extremely heartwarming, and also shows that, whatever culture we've been trying to build thus far has worked, and it has percolated, at least so far, in the team. Going forward, again, it will take a different type of effort. So number one is always the consumer metrics, right? Because they never lie. There could be one odd case of some consumer not being able to understand you as a brand or your product really well, and in that odd case, you will probably have a poor rating. But by and large, it's always true that consumers and the ratings never lie. Number two, of course, you look at the sales, and there's a minimum threshold that you fix for every outlet, depending on the tenure or the maturity or the market potential. Right? There's now a more scientific way of arriving at this, but initially we had just done more back of the envelope kind of calculations that, if this is what my fixed cost look like, this is what my variable cost should look like, and therefore this is the kind of profit I should be taking home every day. The other piece to remember for scale retail operations is, right, it's never a flat line. There will be some amount of seasonality, and you have to factor that into your business projections. There will be some amount of locational variability. And that again needs to be factored in, right? Not every outlet, you'll have like a baseline number, and then there will be, say, 10-15% which will be below that, and then there could be about 10-15% which are way above that, right? So you have to factor for all of that while you're building your business and the projections. You can't expect all of them to perform at the same levels. And that's something that we are cognizant of. So we now categorize them as, they're different clubs. So we have a 2 crore club, there is a 1 crore club, there is a under 1 crore club. So the outlets are like segmented, that these outlets can give you a 2 crore a year. This can give you a 1 crore, or this could be potentially this. And the endeavor is always to move the bottom rung to the higher and higher and so forth, right? But you have to accept the reality that not all of them will be in the 2 crore club right from the beginning.
Are there any easy tells that can give you a sense before you set things up on what the potential of that market is? Yes. Are there other reference companies or products?
Yes. Oh, it requires a lot of research, Govind, to be honest. I mean, people could say anything to you. You go to a mall and you try and negotiate a site. If the leasing teams want you there, they will inflate all kind of numbers. They will tell you there's lakhs of people coming into the mall. Our parking is packed up on the weekends, and they will tell you that, all your neighbors are doing, 30+% kind of profits and so on and so forth. You don't have to take everything on face value. You have to do a lot of ground level research, which could even include, showing up at different hours at that particular asset, right? Whether it is early morning or late night and so on and so forth. It could even include just going and counting the number of cars parked on a weekday in the basement of that mall, right? And we've done all of that in the beginning. Today, we have much more reliable information and data available to us. But early on, you have to do your own research. You have to build your own point of view. It even includes, maybe ordering in from those brands and checking how is the experience looking like at peak hours. If at peak hours, somebody is able to give you your food in 5 minutes, then probably they're not as busy as they claim to be, right? So it's a triangulation of a lot of different things that you have to look at. We even go down to Swiggy and Zomato and count the number of ratings that they've received, right? If they're saying that, they are enormously busy, but the number of ratings on the platform is just, say, under 100 or 150, then there's something not matching up, right?
So through this conversation, we've sort of, even in this answer, we sort of switch between the physical world and then Swiggy and Zomato, which is more like dark stores. So if I may ask, what is your percentage revenue split between the food delivery platforms versus dine-in versus maybe even catering?
Sure. So we only started our offline journey back again last year. Before that, for a period in between, so those 4 years or so, we were only delivery centric, and only after all waves of COVID were done and so on, that's when we've started our physical retail journey again. So today we have only under 10 physical outlets. This count is growing, so we are only opening physical stores now. But currently, because only 10% stores are physical, even the revenue share remains the same, 90-10.
And how do the margins typically, you can answer specifically or more broadly, but how do these margins change with like the physical stores versus the cloud kitchens? And Yeah.
So to be honest, it's not very different, right? I think today the only people who have margins of business are the distributors. People who own distribution are the ones who actually own your neck, right? So you can be a great company or a great product, but you still have a distribution layer in between, and that's where you have to pay. If online, if there is a Swiggy or Zomato or an ONDC commission in place, but in the physical world there's rent, which is the equivalent of that amount, right? And the cost of branding, the cost of running a physical store is a lot higher. The number of people you require, the environment, the cost of setup, and so on, all that adds up. So the margins may or may not be very different depending on the product category that you're in. But if at a store level you're getting anywhere between 20 to 25, I think you're good. Add to that your central cost, which could be your corporate marketing, admin, and so on. At our stage, right? And at much later stage, it could be a little different. But at our stage, if you have under 10% for all of these other below the line expenses, and at a company level, you're sitting at about 15 to 18%, then I think it's very, very good.
Interesting. Yeah. So what are your views on like Swiggy and Zomato and these aggregators? I'm curious to know, what are your views there?
So I think we've really benefited with our association, right? We wouldn't be the company we are. First of all, we wouldn't have survived COVID if it hadn't been for this distribution channel, right? The fact that we could continue to serve our products to our customers, get the money in our bank, pay our teams, and sustain, which was a prolonged period. It wasn't, the lockdowns may have looked like only a month or two, but the entire cycle was actually 2 years long because, for anybody and everybody to have faith to go out and start consuming food or start going out, it took that long in many pockets, right? I have friends and family who didn't step out of home for 2 long years, right? And therefore, I think our very survival was because of the fact that we were on these digital platforms and they provided our consumers access to us and vice versa. Secondly, I think we've always looked at it as an ally. And I think, forces change, things shift, and there's so much that's going on in the world that these kind of things will continue to happen in our lifetimes, where we will see tectonic shifts in the way we did something before and how we do that today, right? If it's a large enough shift and you have to be smart enough to use it and gauge it. When you use it, you realize what are the reasons I'm going to stick to this, and therefore what are the reasons other people are going to stick to this. So we are going to see many more innovations like that in our lifetimes. I would say that, the best way is to understand it and embrace it and build systems around it so you can take advantage of the changing trend, right? It's almost like moving from feature phones to smartphones or moving from, hello, can you send me 10 samosas to, I click an order on a website to, I go into an app and find my favorite order. And tomorrow it could be something else, who knows, right? But whatever that may be, I think as smart entrepreneurs and innovators, we need to be ahead of that curve. We need to understand the changing trends and take advantage, which is exactly what we've done with Swiggy and Zomato, right? We've always treated them as allies. We work very, very closely with their teams. In fact, so closely that we escalate when we don't get enough attention, right? We go and tell them, why are you not spending enough time with us? We need more data. We need more information. We need to grow more. What else have you learned? What are your demographics looking like? And those kind of immersions are always very, very helpful. They are sitting on such large sets of metadata. Right, which we don't have access to today. So if we're not taking advantage of that, then I think we're foolish. And that's the culture we have down the line in our organization. Learn from those who know better than you.
Right. Fair enough. On Swiggy Zomato specifically, since they are the platforms of today, what does discovery typically look like, right? And especially, maybe you can even answer this question from someone who's just looking to get started. What is that journey of like how much do you put in any special effort in making sure you target specific search terms versus, maybe buying ads on them and being displayed a certain way? Is there a digital strategy that people formulate around this, or is it much simpler of just like providing good experience and then systems will figure it out?
You need a very, very strong digital strategy also on these platforms, right? It's almost equivalent to being on Google or being on Amazon or any of the marketplaces. So there's a full team that works on this, and Amit personally leads that team from the growth angle. And there's multiple paths to it. It's not just about just the SEO. It's also the merchandising. How are your products looking, your nomenclature, your pricing, your cost your fonts, are you visible on every single entryway that you have? If you look at the platforms today, right, they have multiple entryways. There is, even if you just go to Swiggy, for example, you'll have your Instamart, you will have your minis, you will have food delivery, and so on and so forth, right? Once you've entered food delivery, again, there are multiple entryways. If you're looking for a budget meal, if you're looking for award-winning categories, you're looking for snacks, you're looking for a meal, and so on and so forth. I think the important thing is that today you have to be present across all of those entryways. And some of these could be even discount led in the beginning, where you realize that. And again, looking at data, understanding that, and making it work for you is very, very critical. So you need to understand, and all of your platforms today have customer segmentations depending on their affinity to certain types of brands, their propensity to pay average order checks for these consumers, their frequency, or even the areas that they live in, right? So you have to triangulate all of this and formulate your strategy. Who do you want to be relevant to? There could be a time where you're trying to be relevant to premium millennials, which was our early adopter set, right? In the last 5 years, the maximum amount of consumers that we have garnered are the premium millennials, who are a little bit of a price agnostic. They want quality, they want healthy, hygienic, good food, and they will come back to you again and again, right? Their loyalty is far greater. We are seeing that now change to Gen Z, which is, the 15 to 25-year-olds who have very different consideration sets. So your merchandising needs to look different. Your price hook needs to look different. What you're communicating needs to look different. Your icons on, whether you're communicating on Instagram, Facebook, or anywhere else, the people who are representing your brand need to look different. So it's there is a part of the physical retail business and the people part and all of that, but there is a very, very strong data, strategy, technology, merchandising engine which works behind to make it successful as well, right? Even where you put your first pin down, where do you open your outlet, is not just a function of just physically assessing the area. You've got to look at the demographics. You've got to look at, what kind of footfalls are you getting. In fact, we use tools for these too. There is a tool called Spatic that we use, which helps us, and we've put down the variables there. My consumer is somebody who wears a pair of jeans that costs between this much to this much, right? That's the kind of detailing that you have to get into today to not make those mistakes of putting up a physical store in a location where you don't belong.
Interesting. What was the tool that you mentioned? Spatic?
Spatic, yes.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Retail intelligence.
Cool. Interesting. Super interesting.
We have a AI and ML backed inventory forecasting system. So none of our teams on the face of it today, businesses may look like, the manager's nice, great food, and so on and so forth. But there is so much technology that goes behind making each of the different parts of business work that you have to adopt them and evolve with them very early, right? So almost 2 years ago, we adopted our supply chain forecasting system, and we've sort of co-built it with the company who was just starting out at that time. So today our outlets, the reason I said that, about 95 to 98% uptime on our products, that's because there is very smart technology working on the forecasting at the back end. And no one has to manually go into and say that today I sold 100, so tomorrow I will need 150 because it's a weekend or whatever, right? All of this is automated. All of this is very, very intelligently managed with the use of intelligent technology. And that then leads to whatever metrics you're trying to achieve. Is a pain point, because we often get misunderstood for cute samosa people, right? People, unless they, especially in the beginning, people will just say, "Oh yeah, okay, you sell samosas, all right, nice." And some of them would even think that we probably sit at home and make it ourselves, right? But you don't understand that scaling businesses, irrespective of what you're selling today, it is a game of digital strategies. It is a game of super product development mindset, and then everything else that follows, right? So yeah, thank you for asking this question.
Yeah. Very interesting. Speaking about trends, right? One of the big things that is out in the market today is all about ONDC.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any views on it, or do you just feel like it's really early? Curious to hear your take.
It's actually picking up quite well. In the last
Hmm.
3 months, we've seen a lot of conversions on ONDC, and like I said, the trends of when your consumer demographic changes, your channel mix also changes, right? So we are seeing a lot of younger consumers coming through ONDC, those who are stuck to the existing platforms and are used to them are probably still going to prefer to use these platforms unless a really massive disruption happens. But we are seeing a lot of new users, a lot of younger users coming to us through ONDC. In the last 3 months itself, we've 5x our share on ONDC from what it used to be. In fact, our goal this year is, July over August, we're looking at going 2x from June, which is already a 5x. So it's quite exciting to see people. And I think brand is an advantage here. So if you are a known brand and if people can trust you, even if there isn't enough ratings, reviews, or information available, but they have had their first-hand experience with you somewhere else, and they discover you on a new platform, chances are that they will transact with you there. So we're seeing a lot of movement on ONDC. Provided you're able to, provide the same kind of customer experience, I think it is set to grow.
Interesting. What specific apps are these new age consumers accessing ONDC, finding Samosa Party, and getting to you? Do you have any visibility of that?
So we're seeing a lot of activity on Magic Pin. We are seeing activity on Ola. We're seeing a lot of activity on our own website and app. Right. So these three larger channels, I think in between there was a little bit that happened on pin code as well, which is I think PhonePe owned. So at that time, yeah. So that time we saw some chatter there as well. But right now these 2-3 are the major ones, including our own website and app.
Got it. Do you end up having your own delivery fleet as well, or is there something? No, it's completely true. Okay.
So
makes sense.
The ground rule, and again, I think I said this right in the beginning, right? We've learned to delegate things we can't do. So things we can't do or don't want to do, I think it's better left to the experts, and therefore we don't have our delivery fleet.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. So let's actually jump back onto the product and Samosa Party.
Sure.
One of the things that I've at least noticed recently is you started adding additional SKUs, chole bhature, chole kulches, and most recently, my favorite item on the menu, all the new rice bowls.
Right.
What's the thought process over there about adding these additional SKUs?
Sure.
How do you arrive at this? Curious to hear the entire thought process there.
Sure. So the number one thing is that, you have to define your boundaries and say, what is it that you will do and what is it that you will not do, right? And therefore, if you see our product curation also, it has always been within those boundaries of what fits into a samosa party, right? And when I say that, samosa party doesn't just stand for samosas alone. Samosa party actually is a verb. So you would say that, let's do a samosa party, and it may or may not involve samosas. It would be a cheap and cheerful party that you throw for your friends or family without alcohol in a more cool, casual sort of setting, right? So that's what the word samosa party actually means. And that's where the brand's name came from, that we wanted to stand for hangout. We wanted to stand for, a cool, casual gathering of people, whether it's in their own homes and offices or whether it was in our physical space, which is why if you see our stores, they have this very trendy, cool vibe. There's a foosball table. You can go and play and, just really hang out and take that break from your busy work day or shopping or whatever that it is, right? So that's where Samosa Party stands as a brand. And samosa happens to be our largest product offering. We do samosa charts, which again, are samosas, but in a different format. Similarly, I think we did chole samosa chaat, and then we got demand saying that, why don't we do chole bhature also? So it was just an addition of one more additional SKU, which is the bhatura, because the chole, chutney and everything already exists in the system. Then similarly, we realized that, there was a lot of demand coming from people, especially in the physical stores, that for more substantial meal options during the meal hours, right? And India is a rice eating country. So we figured we had to do rice, but we didn't want to do it again the traditional way of, you do rice and you do a curry. So we said, what is a modern samosa party way of doing this, which could be very ownable by the brand, and it doesn't look like, it doesn't belong to us. So if you see our rice bowls as well, they are, number one, they're innovative and customizable, which is what we've always stood for, right? You should be able to customize your buckets. You should be able to have different fillings and offerings. So therefore, you have these options of different curries, different types of rice, and so on, all freshly made. Then next, in terms of the toppings and in terms of how the whole bowl comes together, there is a samosa crisp or a samosa in it, right? So it's very ownable by Samosa Party and not something that any other brand can tomorrow replicate and say, this is my version. Because it sort of, when you see it, and again, like I said earlier about the samosas, when you see the product, you should know who it belongs to. So you can just look at our bowls and you will know they belong to us, right? And because we deal with more edgy, trendy consumer set, we've made them customizable, or sort of you can build your own bowls almost like how you build a burrito, right? And that being the framework of how do you make cool, edgy products which are in demand, which belong in the framework of Indian flavors, Indian ethnic snacking. And at the same time, because this was a consumer need of slightly more fulfilling sort of products, that's where these products have come from. We're also innovating a few more desserts now, which again, sort of belong in the realm of Samosa Party, and looking to provide more wholesome dining in experiences in our stores as well.
Interesting. Samosa Party as a verb. I love it.
Thank you.
So maybe I can.
If you just Google Samosa Party, you'll find many examples of that. Or you just go on Twitter, right? Especially, we've seen Ed Sheeran recently said this in one of his interviews. He said that, there is a producer who calls everybody for a Samosa Party. He makes you listen to different songs and tracks, and then you decide which ones sound good. So Samosa Party is a thing. We didn't invent it.
Love it.
I like the way you frame I like the fact that it's, we started with samosas. I wonder if the Samosa Party phrasing was intentional when you got started, or whether now you can look back on it as like a verb rather than a product center.
It has always existed, and that was the reason we named the brand Samosa Party.
Got it. Cool. So if I may end on maybe just one long-term question before we can do our rapid fire, right? Which is like, where do you see all of this going? What is the most optimistic scenario? And maybe working backwards, what are the three things perhaps that are top of your mind in terms of what you need to do to get there?
I think we're very optimistic, right? Especially given that, the way things are changing in our country right now and all over the world. I think the number one thing that keeps us very, very excited about building this Indian brand is that there is a renewed pride in our identities as people, right? You see Indians being a lot more self-assured and out there talking about their identities, their culture, their music, their tradition, art, craft, festivals, and so on and so forth. And I think we sit right there where, for many, many years, we were, again, another interesting term that I like to use is, we were samosa shamed as a country. Right?
I love it.
Because you didn't want to be seen eating it in public. You didn't want to be seen eating with your hands in public. You didn't want to be seen having a cutting chai. You wanted to be seen doing cool things. And I think today's generation, because we are so much more self-assured, we see this renewed sense of pride in all things Indian. And therefore, that samosa shaming is also going away. And that helps us as a brand, right? Where people feel comfortable in their skin talking about, I love samosas. And that's something that we as individuals have always believed. I think for the longest time, I would probably have been the one pahadi in a room where everybody was drinking coffee in a 5-star environment. I'd say, no, I want chai, right? And I see a lot more people doing that today because we are a lot more self-assured, proud and optimistic about our identities. And that's something that keeps us very excited about even taking this brand global and making sure that, people know Samosa Party as the beacon of India's ethnic snacking culture and are able to partake in its goodness anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Great note to end on.
Definitely. I fully believe that, by the way, Diksha. There are more than enough. There are 1 in 6 people in the world are Indians, and we are all over the world at this point. The Bay Area or even Dubai, Middle East, other parts of Asia. Totally see it.
Yes, absolutely. And why just Indians, right? I think it's a product that could be loved by any and every ethnicity. It's a very simple product. It's just, end of the day, it's fried dough wrapped with things that you like to eat. So what's not to enjoy?
Yeah. Cool. Awesome, Diksha. So let's just do a quick rapid fire round. Yes, rapid fire. And yeah, I guess I can kick it off. You know the drill. I'll ask a question. First thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Go ahead and answer that. So, what's the one book you recommend every entrepreneur read and why?
Shoe Dog, Phil Knight.
Love it. What's the one habit you've adopted that's been a game changer for you?
Delegation.
Okay. What's the biggest surprise you've encountered on your entrepreneurial journey?
Not just the entrepreneurial journey. I think life in general. Don't trust everyone.
I guess I'll ask you about some of those things offline.
Yes, we should catch up later.
If you could go back and give your starting self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think don't get ahead of yourself. Right, starting up as entrepreneurs, the world always looks very good, and you overestimate your capabilities, you overestimate the market, you overestimate everything. So just taking it one day at a time, keeping smaller goals in mind, and just executing relentlessly on that. I think that would be very, very helpful. There have been disappointments because I thought we could do XYZ a lot more, but it doesn't always work out like that.
Yeah, no, makes sense. If you could have any entrepreneur as a mentor, who would it be and why?
Oh, I have the best mentor in the world, which is Amit, my husband and co-founder. Right? He takes me with all my flaws and all the blessings, and extremely candid about anything and everything. I don't think I need any external mentor at all. I have one with me 24/7.
Nice. Love it. Love it. Cool, Diksha. Sounds good. This is absolutely fantastic. I learned a ton. Both me and Govind, being in the software space, we keep speaking to other software entrepreneurs, but it's so interesting to actually speak to someone like you who's built such an incredible brand. And there's a lot under the surface, which is the really cool part about it, and which is what I really enjoyed learning about today.
I was also just taking notes on my general learning. Like the one thing that also came across was just general passion. Like you had so many stories where I'm like, why stand on the edge of a highway and put up this billboard? And the only way I could rationalize it is maybe this person thinks a little, it's more than just a business. It's maybe a little bit more of a mission, or it's like part of your identity and your story, which would drive you to do something like that.
It's a movement. It's actually a movement, and the reason why we are able to talk of such higher order things is because we've always approached it like that. We don't make the money we make in corporates. I think Rohith will probably have an idea of our paychecks at co-works, right? And the kind of money we make today or in the last few years, it will never come close, right?
Yeah.
Unless we have a massive exit or anything. But it is a movement. And I've seen it up close. I've seen sitting in boardrooms with KFC, Pizza Hut and the likes, how Indian street food was vilified, how it was, how people were made to believe this is street food, this is pedestrian, it's not good for you. And they had all this American marketing and PR machinery working for them, while the small guy selling samosas in the corner did not. He did not even know what's going to come his way. But all of this has happened through very orchestrated PR efforts, where we look at our food with a lot of disdain. And thankfully, there are some people who are now changing that narrative. They are saying, go back to your roots, go back to what you were born eating, or, whether it is your produce like millets or seasonal vegetables and so on, or anything else. But more often than not, it is always the PR machinery which destroys consumer perceptions. So we believe that, this movement of taking pride in our country, in its ethnic heritage, in the food that we've always grown up eating. And if we are able to do it at the global standards of hygiene, branding, communication, the overall technology piece and everything that I spoke about, then why can't Samosa Party be bigger than a McDonald's or a KFC or one of those, right? It will take time, but I think now is the time to actually start building on that movement, where we are going to decolonize our fast food, because it's always been colonized.
Wow. That's amazing. The elevation of the. Can I ask one thing, Rohit? Rohith and I keep having this debate, which is, you see a lot of mission-centric entrepreneurs, and I mean, you do come across as that. I'm curious, does the mission come first? And I mean, there was like this, sounded more, I guess it would have been more frivolous when you started, which is I know I'm not getting the food that I like. Does the mission come after, or do you think that samosa shaming, which, sort of subconsciously sits in the back of your head while you're sitting in these meetings, eventually comes out? What comes first?
It comes after. You learn every day, right? You learn about all of these things. You learn about the market. Like I said, we had no idea in our first few meetings. And in fact, this is interesting. Rohith got us our first VC meeting. Rohith may get us to meet Samir, right? You remember you got me to meet Samir?
Yeah.
And we had no idea. We walked into a tech VC's office with our products and everything. The whole conversation was just about the food. Obviously, we did not invest. We didn't have clarity of what we were building. And so it was so early. I was still working at Coworks. And I remember he even pointed out, he told Amit, Sara kaam tujhse karwa rahi hai na. So yeah, you learn every day. You learn how people look at your industry. You learn how people look at your products. You learn how people look at your consumers also, right? A lot of times they would want to believe. In fact, our the way we have curated our menu, right? Our average order values are equivalent to Domino's. And that's a surprise because people have this common misconception thinking that, it's a samosa must be like 25, 30 rupees or 50 at best. But you don't realize that the behavior around the product is community. And try to hone in on that insight that if people are using this in a communal environment where they are sitting with friends, family, and so on, why not provide them products which are more centric to that? So the round buckets, which are as democratic as it gets, you can access it from all sides. You can keep it in the center and come around it, right? So all these are very deliberate, intentional decisions of launching products which would bring people together in a very casual, unintentional sort of way. And because you've created that environment where if I order a bucket of 10, I'm not going to eat it alone at my desk. I'll probably just holler over a few more people into my cabin or at my desk and say, hey guys, I got some samosas. Why don't we get together? You're naturally driving that behavior and you're naturally driving your average order values higher. So
I didn't think of that.
Connected.
Yeah.
It's in the name. It's a party, right? So yeah, literally the
party. It's literally, it's also the perfect comfort food. During COVID times, a lot of people got stuck in different cities where they didn't belong, and they would send us mails or messages on our Instagram saying that, when I really missed home is when I ordered Samosa Party and ate that because it gave me the comfort of my childhood. It gave me the comfort of my home. And lots of heartwarming stories. We've come across a customer who said his mother was, dealing with cancer and she wanted to eat samosas. So he wanted to make sure it came from a very hygienic environment. He reached out to me on LinkedIn. I gave him my number, made the product in a very kosher sort of space. Even within our kitchen, we earmarked a small space. He came personally to pick the products up. And it was just so satisfying that, and that's where the mission builds, right? I mean, you don't start knowing all of this, but the mission started to build when we saw the connection of the product and our brand with people. Day before yesterday, my doctor told me that, her driver had eaten Samosa Party in her house because they were having a Samosa Party and they offered him some. So now it was his daughter's birthday and he said, I want to have a Samosa Party for my daughter. And this is a middle-aged South Indian man who doesn't have a connection with this product. But for him, it's aspirational because, she was having a party in her home and she was consuming this. And that was the most aspirational thing that he could do for his daughter's birthday. So those are the stories that, sort of help you build on that mission. Yeah, I can just go on and on, guys.
No. This is also fun because if someone's selling B2B, that to software, A, I don't touch anything, and B, I'm selling to like businesses, which are a little bit more, a little less soulful than a consumer. So as you're saying all of this, I'm also living vicariously through your stories.
That's great, Govind. We should catch up sometime. Whenever you're in Samosa Party, just give me a shout.
I will. That's awesome. Yeah, I will for sure. Cool. Thank you so much, Diksha.
Thank you so much, Diksha.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, what do you think?
Really good. Firstly, I'm also curious about one story which we didn't leave, which is towards the end, she said you introduced her to VCs and stuff. How early did you invest? Like, why did you invest? I'm also curious.
With Diksha, I met her for the first time when I was working at the Coworks Foundry as a technology investment partner. It was something I was doing part-time while trying to scale up the business I was working on at that point. And she was awesome. She was like arguably someone who was just there, like just omnipresent throughout the entire company. And she's so friendly. She's so charismatic. she she's just one of those people who you just want to work with and work for, right? And she told me that, hey, she's thinking about doing this. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Let me introduce you to a few folks that I know, right? And I made those introductions. I didn't invest at that point, even partly because I didn't have money back then. Otherwise, I totally would have. And they ended up raising a really small round, I think around 1.5 million. I don't quote me on that. But then after that, in the next round, when I had a little bit more money, I did end up investing a small ticket at that point. And yeah, really, for me, I love the product, and I'd never met Amit before until like a few weeks ago. But Diksha, someone I just think is awesome, right? Just like you can just put her in front of anyone, right? And don't you just feel like you want to try this product, right? She's just such an incredible like evangelist for things, right? And for the company, for the product. So yeah.
So this is also a question on like the psyche of an investor, right? At that stage, I guess you've learned a lot about the business even now as it goes along. But at that stage, you would have invested just on the person, right? As opposed to your thesis
100%.
on Samosas.
Money, I 100% would have, right? And for what it's worth, I really think Samosa Party is going to be a lot bigger than even when I ended up investing, right? So yeah, I actually feel quite good about I feel quite good about the investment that I made. Yeah. And part of the reason why I keep going to Samosa Party, I keep dragging like other people from work to Samosa Party.
You're making money for yourself. I was going to say the other thing that, I mean, even as a theme across our, I guess the two interviews we've done, including with Dhruv earlier, is that I think the entrepreneur, like when we think of business ideas, most people are thinking top down, we're thinking market size, we're thinking TAM. And so at some point it becomes a very like mechanical exercise. Whereas I do think, and the thing I do want for myself is that degree of like irrational love for a problem. Because if you start defining a samosa sounds trivial. If you start defining it in terms of like freaking, like she made me think about East India Company and the wrongs that the British have done towards me. I'm like, damn it, to like fight all these injustices, I must buy samosa. She probably like believes that if she's holding that placard, because that seems like a very, like, how do you justify that as like a marketing spend or in terms of like value of money? So maybe for this whole, how to start a startup or what startup idea should I look at? Doing something that feels irrationally right to you and like evokes your passion, and you would just spend even the extra like 20 minutes she spent with us at the end of that call, right? Is because she wants to tell her story, right? Feels like this is the sort of thing she'd be doing on a Saturday evening, or even when she's out with friends, talking about like samosa shaming and stuff like that. I think having that makes the journey worth it also, right? Because never mind the TAM, the margins, the EBITDA, all of this fancy stuff. At the end of the day, chances are like whatever you're doing may or may not work out. But if you feel that level of like passion, it feels like a life that's a little bit more, well lived, regardless of the outcome. So I feel like that's what I'd want for like myself, and I guess every like quote unquote weekend entrepreneur who looks at this, which is forget all the details, just go like have fun and care about, have a story which you're proud to. Let me put it this way: have a story you're proud to sort of bring up when you walk into a room. Because there's so many conversations I have where I'm like, hey, so what do you do? People are like, it's a weekend, I don't want to talk about my work. If anything, it should be like the other way around. Like, it's a weekend, let me now still tell you about the thing, because that's the thing. I wake up first thing in the morning, in the evening, and this is my story, and I want to tell you my story.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about this, right? So I do want to spend a little bit time like talking about what we learned. I think this is, and you asked this question as well, right? In terms of whether she was always mission first, or what was it something that grew over time? And it was definitely something that grew over time. Earlier on, it started out almost as a hobby, and like she said as well, we weren't really making any money or anything like that, but there was a lot of customer love, and they just really enjoyed doing this, right? And then it became a business. I feel one of the things that I think a lot of us have fallen, I know a lot of people have fallen into this trap where it's like, hey, I'm building a business, I need to do all these different things. And it's almost like you're backing yourself into a corner of like, it has to be something big, it has to be something massive, even before you've taken the first step. So the first step they took was definitely really small. They both didn't end up quitting their full-time job. It was extremely stressful and tiring at that point for them, but they just made it work. And then they ended up deciding like, hey, this is actually something that they really enjoy doing more than their regular job. Let me actually do this full time, which to me, if you think about it, is quite that in a lot of ways uh, is a better way to build companies, and there isn't one right way, but especially for people who have probably other commitments in life and so on. Yeah.
I know you said there isn't one
Uh,
right way, but there's one thing I feel kind of strong about, which is so doing a full-time job and then doing something on the side is a stretch on your time, but you also do it because I guess financially it makes sense, right? It's irrational to jump into something before you know if it's a business. So there's the other method, which is people are like, hey, I want to try something, but let me raise some seed money so that I can pay myself and cover the bills while I do it. I feel like the latter, even though it gives you a lot more time objectively to accelerate that cycle, I feel like psychologically it sort of messes you up a little bit because the clock starts. And then you put that sort of formal label on top of it. So even though it's like the on paper theoretical rational thing to do, so much of this kind of journey is about the psychology that if you're doing it as like a hobby, it's fun. If you make it like serious and put a clock on it, then it must work out in the next 3 months, and you start looking at the margins and the revenue, and go to your VC meeting and give your new boss the updates that it can kill what would otherwise have just been continued to be like a passion project you can sort of dive in and out of until you fully fall in love. Yeah.
What were the things you found most interesting in the conversation?
So at a consumer level, I found the whole health thing interesting, right? Because this is something I do want to read up a little bit more about. But there is my instinct, because I'm representing myself and I project my views on the rest of the world, was the whole, samosas do have a negative perception. I think twice before I eat a samosa. She's right. Like I do not judge, but I do look at it as like a cheat thing, which I don't do very regularly often. Even now when I get together with friends, it's like kombucha is being passed around with like a bunch of baked chips as opposed to samosas. But then there is something visceral, right? We're like, I'm home. When I'm home for the summer, I eat the samosa because it's like, I'm at home. How often do I get to do that? And my mom's feeding it to me, so it's fine. So I did think her framing around that was interesting. I'm curious how I was also thinking about how the strong story I got from her is not necessarily projected on Swiggy, Zomato, the app. Like they have very limited real estate, because the moment I see Samosa Party, I may not even click on it. So I was curious about how they may reposition that. Maybe it's just a skew. Maybe it's the millet samosa that's baked or something like that. I was thinking about how they can change the image around a product, because the product is not their product. It's not Samosa Party. It is the samosa, which is like existed before Samosa Party for like hundreds of years. So how do you reframe that projection was one of the things that occurred to me because of my consumer biases.
Yeah. For me, there were two.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say a word on ONDC, but you know what? Go ahead first.
Yeah, for me, the biggest takeaway for me, almost, and this might be because I'm a product guy, but just the deep focus on product in the early days and really developing the consumer love around the product, right? She ended up speaking to all these chefs. She ended up, she and Amit, I don't want to say just Diksha, but they ended up trying to figure out how to actually have a freshly fried samosa served to the customer in under 4 minutes. That was one of those things, like as she said, was their first big product innovation, stamping the samosa to actually end up like solving for that consumer problem regarding like what exactly the samosa actually was, introducing all these new fillings within the samosa itself. Just the level of focus and attention to detail spent on the product in the early years, really making that rock solid before actually focusing on scale. That part was super interesting to me. I think a lot of people are almost in a rush to actually end up, myself included, right? To actually just grow. But the reality is, unless your product is actually really good, it's going to be a leaky bucket. So that was definitely one big takeaway for me. The amount of thought that actually went into the overall branding, and the company was also really interesting. Like, I didn't even think about, hey, there's a samosa bucket. There's a lot of reasons to do it. We're building community with it. It's also increasing our order value. It just felt very thoughtfully put together in terms of, and I don't know if you, and I know you visited the outlet as well, right? There's such a strong sense of brand in each of these outlets as well. So it just feels like the attention to detail is like really, really, really strong. And then, yeah, even how she spoke about how she builds culture, how they still keep interviewing every single person who's above shift manager, still goes through her, really creating that sense of ownership. These are all things you look for in an entrepreneur, right? Like deep focus on the product, really stepping into your consumer shoes, making sure you set the right culture, right? I am just, let's put it this way, in terms of Samosa Party and Diksha and Amit and everything that they're doing.
Yeah, I'll go one step further. I feel like I think above a certain ability level, everyone has the ability to do it. So I feel like it's more than a founder. I think it's also a founder market fit, right? The affliction I have is that a lot of these things are interesting the first time you do it because of the fact that you're building a product, the fact that you're having to hire someone, the fact that you want to put like a good recruiting system in place. But and then maybe interesting in like your early 20s, the first time you're doing it. But then subsequent to that, the process itself is not that interesting. So it takes a lot of energy to want to necessarily do that. And I think the only way that happens is that is not just wanting to build a big business, but also genuinely caring about the act of creation, the act of making this particular idea succeed rather than making a idea succeed. So I'd say it's like founder at a base level, but then like founder, market, passion, fit. And if you have that, you just want to make the product better, right? Like I see this in software engineering all the time. Like from time to time, if you ask an engineer a rational question, because I write code and I do a lot of that stuff. Sometimes it rationally does not make sense to like make your code better in a certain way. Or sometimes you actively land up working on features where if you directly draw a line between the feature and customer ROI, it's really hard to do. But then some people just do it because it feels like, oh, you know what, I can make this one thing like, a little bit more delightful. The ROI almost never makes sense. But if you go to that level of like, forget the ROI, or just like, I think this would be a better experience and I want this to be reflected in the art that I'm creating. I think if you sort of, I mean, maybe I'm being too romantic, but I think if you start elevating it to that level, then you have the appetite, the energy, the desire to do all these other things that make you like eventually put you in touch with the bigger things that you can get from the customer, work backwards, build a better business, and then the whole cycle starts. So,
yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I guess was a takeaway for me is I've never built a physical business before, but I do agree with what Diksha said, where if you have the desire to do something, you can end up learning things. That's something I strongly believe in. It may be painful. I'm not debating that. But I think a lot of people just sort of hold themselves back from doing something that they really want just because they're like, hey, I've never done something like this before. But the reality is if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're likely going to have to do a whole bunch of different things that you've never done before, right? And you just have to get out of your comfort zone. So yeah, that was another thing that I knew it, but I'm glad she spoke. Just one of those things that just reminded me again. Yeah.
I want to ask you about one thing that totally with you on that. I want to ask you about one thing she said, right? Which is, if you want to maximize the amount of money you make, expected value of money you make, don't do this. I mean, it's here, judging by the jobs that Amit and Diksha held, chances are, I mean, if you wanted to have a good bank balance at the end of your career, the smarter thing to do would have just been to stick with those jobs and keep going on. And this gives you an interesting story with maybe a shot at making a lot more money, but probably not, right? So I know we talk about this as like money making vehicles as well, and it is a business of creating money. But do you think that sort of money focus also kills things early on? Because in 2 years in, for most startups, if you judge it by, the money I've left behind, especially if you've been making good salary and you start multiplying the months to like old salary minus new salary multiplied by the number of months you've been away from this, and then, like watered down by the expected value of a payout and stuff, you'll just be kicking yourself constantly. And then year 2, year 3, you'll be like, what the hell? And then go back and get the job.
No, See, I think you will need to take. Okay, this is what I believe. I do feel like, from a personal standpoint, you do need to have your personal finances in order before you actually start a company. I know a lot of people don't, but it's just a huge level of stress on you if you don't have that in order. And Diksha and Amit, I can't speak to their personal finances and what that they were at, but I'm sure they had a certain level of savings. They end up doing this on the side, right? So there was never a point of not having a paycheck, right? And then they ended up, like, raising around, probably started drawing a small salary. And even now, they're probably drawing a lot less than what they would make if they were working somewhere else. But there's more to life than your bank balance, right? You need to have your personal finances taken care of, but there's so much more to it, in terms of, are you really enjoying things, right? Enjoying going to work every day, enjoying doing what you're doing every day. And I don't want people to think that entrepreneurship is all rosy all the time. And we didn't really dive into this with Diksha. Maybe we'll ask her this in another episode, but I'm sure they've had their share of extreme stress and being really worried about things. But um, yeah, my view is, I don't think as an entrepreneur, at least in the early years, you should just be thinking about the salary, right? Because you're not playing that game, right? And I do think you can focus on, like, making money in the longer run and that being a goal. I think that's totally okay. I think that aligns investors, founders, other shareholders perfectly, right? If that is a big goal. The problem, though, with just that being the goal is, when the going gets tough, it's very easy for you to quit as well. So, yeah.
Yes, but I hear you. I also feel like there is a very common thing, though, with like that when things are going well, especially in the early days, and you're raising that little bit of money, and you have a certain sense of, yeah, you know what, the experiment is young. The pressure on you in month one is much less than the pressure on you in like month 48. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs are there because of, like, just sheer, once your business gets to a certain level, it's also hard to sort of, opt out of it. So I see a lot of folks who are doing their businesses because they spend a lot of time. But then once that energy sort of goes down and the money looks a little harder to make, or the money, there's no clarity on the money, then you start you start making that financial decision, and then you stay on nonetheless because of that worry of, you stay on nonetheless because now walking away is just not a choice. And then that sort of reduces the quality of life, right? As opposed to, you know what, if I make money, great, but I'm going to have like a great story out of it. And then sure, of course, I'll optimize for money because that's the only way in which my story becomes bigger. Maybe I'm being a romantic, but that just feels like a more rational way to manage your psychology, because what's underestimated here is so much of it is your psychology, your courage, that crappy feeling you wake up in the morning. I think if you start looking at the numbers and you feel shitty about it, but the story is important, I think really pulls you through. So,
yeah. Dude, I do think it matters what you do, but I also do think you can get passionate about things. I'm not a believer of, hey, you can only have one true passion and that's what you should actually end up building a business around. Even Diksha said that, right? She ended up experiencing so much while building Samosa Party. Like the example she gave about all those cards that she ended up putting regarding all the store managers and people working at Samosa Party, someone reaching out and being like, hey, I'd love to sponsor this person's ticket. Like, those kinds of things just add a lot of excitement to you, right? So I think, I don't know, I personally am a believer that I can be passionate about anything, right? As long as I'm able to connect the, I need to think a little bit more about it. But if I feel like I'm actually adding value to someone else, right, through something that I've built, that's something that I can be passionate about. That's my view on it.
Got it. Well, maybe I'll just leave it at this. I think I wish on everyone's a story that they can feel passionate enough to want to walk into a room and tell everyone about the story, and then actively do something about it at the same time, which will in turn make them endure all the other things. And then in the process, if they make money, great.